The sun was just beginning to dip behind the rooftops of Northfield, Massachusetts, casting long shadows across the quiet streets. In a small, tightly knit community, the disappearance of 22-year-old Rachel Turner had left a void that seemed impossible to fill. Rachel had been a bright, determined young woman, working at a local library and pursuing her dream of becoming a journalist. She was known for her warmth, her laughter, and a spark in her eyes that drew people to her. When she vanished one September evening in 2004, the town was stunned. The initial investigation had been swift but inconclusive. Rachel had been last seen walking home from the library, a bag of books clutched in her hand, and her favorite scarf wrapped around her neck. Witnesses recalled seeing her cross Main Street, glancing over her shoulder as if expecting someone. After she failed to return home, her family called the police, setting in motion a desperate search that would stretch into years. Flyers were distributed, neighbors canvassed, and local media broadcast appeals, but Rachel's trail went cold almost immediately. Detective Laura Simmons, a young officer at the time, remembered the case vividly. "It was like she disappeared into thin air," she said years later. "There were no signs of struggle, no obvious leads. Every day we hoped for a tip, a clue, something to bring her home. But all we had were questions, and the silence was unbearable." The community held vigils, each candle flickering in the night representing hope that slowly began to fade. Rachel's parents, Mark and Emily Turner, endured sleepless nights and endless anxiety, clinging to the smallest signs, any whisper of news about their daughter. For over a decade, the case remained dormant. Leads came and went, none solid enough to reopen the investigation fully. But in 2018, a breakthrough arrived unexpectedly. A newly developed DNA analysis technique offered capabilities far beyond what was available in 2004. Investigators decided to re-examine all evidence collected from the original scene. Among the items was a discarded coffee cup found near the library, long thought to hold no usable information. Advances in DNA extraction and amplification now allowed for even the smallest trace to be analyzed. The results were astonishing. DNA recovered from the cup matched a man in the state criminal database, Thomas Caldwell, a local resident with a minor criminal history but no prior connection to Rachel. He had lived less than 2 miles from the library at the time of Rachel's disappearance. The discovery shocked investigators. "We had spent years combing through leads, chasing shadows, and then suddenly, here was a piece of evidence that had been under our noses all along," said Detective Simmons. The realization that the perpetrator had been so close all those years sent shivers through the police team. Confronting Caldwell was delicate. He had maintained a quiet life, working in construction and rarely interacting with neighbors beyond casual greetings. When approached, he initially denied any involvement, presenting a calm and collected facade that seemed almost rehearsed. But the DNA evidence was undeniable, and further investigation revealed patterns of stalking and obsession that had gone unnoticed at the time of Rachel's disappearance. Emails, notes, and surveillance of Rachel's routines painted a chilling portrait of premeditation. The revelation shook Northfield to its core. Residents, who had lived with uncertainty for 14 years, found themselves reeling as details emerged. Some were angered that Caldwell had gone unnoticed, while others were haunted by the realization that someone they passed on the street every day had been capable of such darkness. Meanwhile, the Turner family struggled with a complex mix of relief and grief. Justice had finally surfaced, but it could never undo the years of suffering, the milestones Rachel had missed, or the emptiness her absence had left behind. Caldwell's arrest was swift, yet the community response was anything but calm. People gathered outside the police station, some weeping openly, others staring in disbelief. The small town that had once rallied to find Rachel now confronted the unsettling truth that their neighbor had been living among them, hiding secrets behind an ordinary exterior. Local media coverage intensified, bringing national attention to what had once been a quiet, overlooked case. As the investigation deepened, the detectives uncovered more disturbing details. Caldwell had been tracking Rachel for weeks before her disappearance, studying her habits and taking advantage of moments when she was alone. The meticulous nature of his planning revealed a level of calculation that made the community shudder. For law enforcement, it was a case study in persistence, forensic innovation, and the importance of re-evaluating cold cases with new technologies. For Rachel's family, it was confirmation that the nightmare they had endured was not the result of random tragedy, but deliberate cruelty. The community slowly began to grapple with the implications. Town meetings were held, residents discussed safety measures, and parents spoke candidly to their children about vigilance. Rachel's friends and coworkers shared memories that had been tucked away for years, painting a vivid picture of her personality, her kindness, and her determination. Her story, though marked by tragedy, became a catalyst for awareness and advocacy, ensuring that her life and her experiences could help protect others. Even before the trial began, emotions ran high. The public had followed every development, from the DNA breakthrough to Caldwell's arrest, and tension in Northfield was palpable. Rachel's parents, while devastated, felt a renewed sense of purpose. They worked closely with prosecutors, ensuring that their daughter's story was told accurately, with dignity and respect. Letters, diaries, and photographs were prepared for submission as evidence, each artifact a testament to Rachel's life and the void left by her absence. Detective Simmons reflected on the case years later, emphasizing the emotional weight of pursuing justice after so long. It wasn't just about solving a crime. It was about honoring Rachel's life, providing closure for her family, and reminding the community that even the oldest cases can be solved, she said. The words resonated deeply, capturing the essence of a pursuit that had spanned time, technology, and human perseverance. As Caldwell's trial approached, Northfield braced itself. The town that had once whispered about Rachel's disappearance now prepared to confront the full truth. Evidence, confessions, and witnesses would paint a chilling narrative, yet it was a narrative that needed to be told. For the Turner family, it was an opportunity to see justice delivered, a chance to reclaim some measure of peace after years of uncertainty. In the midst of this, Rachel's legacy began to take shape. Scholarships in her name were established at the library and local schools, supporting young women pursuing education in literature, journalism, and the arts. Community workshops on safety, awareness, and self-protection were organized, ensuring that Rachel's story would inspire vigilance and empowerment. Her life, though tragically cut short, became a beacon for change, transforming grief into tangible action. The stage was now set for a trial that would not only determine Caldwell's fate, but also offer the community a measure of closure long delayed. The evidence was compelling, the emotions raw, and the stakes impossibly high. Yet through it all, one truth remained undeniable. After 14 years of uncertainty, Rachel Turner's story was finally being told, and justice, long overdue, was within reach. The courtroom was silent except for the quiet shuffle of papers and the occasional cough. It had been nearly 15 years since Rachel Turner vanished from Northfield, and now the day had arrived where her story would be fully revealed, the details once hidden in shadows brought into sharp, painful light. The prosecution laid out the timeline first, meticulous and unyielding. Rachel had left the library on that September evening in 2004, intent on walking the familiar route home with her bag of books swaying against her side. CCTV footage from nearby shops captured her every step, a sequence repeated hundreds of times in town conversations over the years, but until now, it had held no clue to her abduction. Detective Laura Simmons recounted the breakthrough that had reignited the case. The coffee cup found discarded near the library, long dismissed, had been the key. DNA technology had evolved, and the microscopic cells once invisible now spoke volumes. The analysis linked Thomas Caldwell definitively to the disappearance, and further investigation uncovered emails, notes, and records demonstrating weeks of surveillance and obsession. It was chilling to consider how closely he had watched her, the life she led so openly under the community's gaze, and how he had hidden in plain sight. For Rachel's parents, Mark and Emily Turner, every detail came like a jagged blade. Watching the evidence laid bare years after their daughter vanished was both relief and torment. Relief that the truth was finally coming out, torment because it confirmed the darkest fears they had harbored for over a decade. In their private moments, they relived every unanswered phone call, every futile search, every sleepless night where hope and despair wrestled for dominance. The courtroom testimonies revealed the intricate web Caldwell had woven. Witnesses recounted his behavior leading up to the disappearance, subtle and often overlooked. He had asked about Rachel casually at local shops, shown an unusual interest in her daily routines, and had even volunteered to deliver packages to her home under the guise of helpfulness. No one had suspected him because he was careful, deliberate, and outwardly harmless. The revelation that someone so seemingly ordinary could harbor such darkness struck every person in the room. During cross-examination, the defense attempted to portray Caldwell as a troubled man with a minor criminal history but no violent tendencies. They argued that evidence degradation over 14 years could lead to misinterpretation, that the coffee cup might have been contaminated, that DNA alone was insufficient to convict. But the prosecution had anticipated these claims. Lab technicians testified with precision, explaining the chain of custody, contamination controls, and the rigorous methods used to extract and verify the DNA. Additional evidence, emails, notes, and the timeline of his whereabouts was corroborated, painting a portrait of premeditation and obsessive intent that left little room for doubt. Perhaps the most unsettling moment came when Caldwell himself was called to the stand. His demeanor was calm, almost clinical, as he recounted fragments of his actions that night. He admitted to following Rachel, to studying her routine, and to abducting her in a moment of unrestrained impulse. The courtroom shivered as he detailed his calculated efforts to cover his tracks, the twisted methods he employed to ensure no one would suspect him. When he confessed to taking her life, the room was engulfed in a collective gasp. Even hardened detectives and attorneys felt the weight of the years of terror and uncertainty that the Turner family had endured. Outside the courthouse, Northfield streets were crowded with reporters, neighbors, and concerned citizens. For years, the community had speculated, wondered, and feared. Now, the truth stood in the form of an arrested man whose ordinary demeanor had masked extraordinary evil. People who had passed him in the grocery store, nodded politely in the library, or shared casual greetings on the street struggled to reconcile the man they knew with the criminal revealed in court. Conversations buzzed with disbelief and horror. How had they missed the signs? How could someone so integrated into daily life commit such a crime? The Turner family's grief took on new dimensions. While the arrest and confession validated their anguish, it also forced them to confront the betrayal of their town's assumed safety. Emily Turner spoke to reporters, her voice steady yet trembling with emotion. For years, we were searching for Rachel, hoping she was alive, dreaming that somehow she would come back to us. Today, we have answers, but answers cannot bring back her laughter, her dreams, or the moments we will never share. We only hope that justice will honor her memory and protect others from similar pain. Rachel's friends, now grown and navigating their own lives, experienced a renewed wave of trauma and catharsis. Memories they had buried for over a decade resurfaced, walks to the library, shared late-night study sessions, casual laughs at local diners. Every recollection was bittersweet. They grieved the stolen years, the absence of milestones, yet they felt a strange closure, a validation of the anxiety and sorrow that had lingered silently in the background of their adulthood. The trial also revealed the extraordinary role of forensic innovation in resolving cold cases. The DNA extraction and analysis techniques employed were revolutionary, capable of identifying a suspect from minute samples once considered useless. Detective Simmons emphasized the importance of preserving evidence, noting that the coffee cup, long forgotten, had literally held the key to unlocking years of mystery. Law enforcement agencies nationwide began reviewing old cold cases, inspired by the methods that had solved Rachel's disappearance. As the prosecution laid out its evidence, jurors were confronted not just with scientific facts but with the human cost. They saw Rachel's diaries, her personal letters and photographs capturing the life she had lived and the dreams that were abruptly ended. Each artifact was a testament to her vitality, her ambition, and the young woman the town had lost. The emotional resonance of these items was profound, ensuring that the case transcended mere legal proceedings to become a communal reckoning. Caldwell's defense, despite attempts at mitigation, could not withstand the emotional and evidential weight presented. Witnesses testified to his obsessive tracking of Rachel, to his careful concealment, and to the lasting impact his actions had inflicted on the community. The psychological evaluation presented painted a portrait of someone capable of manipulating perception, masking intent, and exploiting trust, confirming what the prosecution argued, that Caldwell had been a predator operating within plain sight for years. Meanwhile, the town grappled with the wider implications of the case. Parents began discussing safety measures with their children, local businesses reviewed security practices, and community forums debated how best to prevent similar tragedies. Rachel's story became a cautionary tale, an urgent reminder that danger often lurks unnoticed in the familiar. Yet, amidst the grief and anger, there was a sense of empowerment. By unearthing the truth and holding Caldwell accountable, Northfield reclaimed agency in the face of long-standing fear. The trial's emotional intensity peaked when Rachel's parents addressed the court directly. Mark Turner spoke first, his voice thick with sorrow. Every day since she disappeared has been a battle between hope and despair. Today, we are reminded that evil can hide in plain sight, but we are also reminded that persistence, patience, and science can uncover the truth. Rachel's life was stolen, but her story will not be forgotten. Emily Turner followed, her words resonating with unflinching clarity. We cannot undo the past, but we can honor her memory by ensuring justice is served and by protecting those who are vulnerable. Rachel deserves that much, and so does every other victim. By the end of the proceedings, the jury reached a unanimous verdict. Thomas Caldwell was convicted of the abduction and murder of Rachel Turner. The sentence was life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, a formal recognition of the magnitude of his crimes and the suffering inflicted on the Turner family and Northfield community. While the sentence could not return Rachel, it delivered a measure of justice long overdue, an affirmation that time and distance do not absolve wrongdoing. In the aftermath, Northfield slowly began healing. Memorials were established in Rachel's honor, including scholarships for aspiring writers and journalists, community initiatives focused on safety awareness, and annual remembrance events to ensure that her life would not be forgotten. Friends and neighbors shared stories, rekindling connections and fostering a collective resilience rooted in shared grief and hope. Detective Simmons reflected on the broader implications, emphasizing that cases like Rachel's underscore the importance of vigilance, innovation, and the refusal to accept closure without evidence. Her work inspired colleagues across the country to revisit cold cases, demonstrating that even decades-old mysteries can be solved when persistence meets technology. For the Turner family, closure came in quiet moments: a visit to a small memorial garden planted in Rachel's name, a candlelit gathering on the anniversary of her disappearance, the knowledge that the community finally understood the truth. Though grief never fully recedes, the certainty that her story had been told, that justice had been delivered, offered a measure of solace. And for Northfield, Rachel Turner became more than a tragic memory. She became a symbol of resilience, of the power of science and determination, and of the community's ability to confront darkness without losing its humanity. Her story, preserved in the meticulous documentation of the case, in the memories of those who loved her, and in the justice finally achieved, ensured that her life, though brief, left an indelible mark on everyone who knew her. The courtroom was tense as the final day of the trial began. The community had waited years for this moment, and now every eye was fixed on the proceedings. The defendant, Thomas Caldwell, sat with an unsettling calm, a stark contrast to the silent anguish visible on Rachel Turner's parents' faces. 15 years of unanswered questions, sleepless nights, and grief were all converging into this one room, where the final truth would finally emerge. Detective Laura Simmons presented the last pieces of the puzzle. A digital reconstruction of Rachel's last known movements played on a screen, capturing the moment she left the library and traced the path that led to her abduction. The visuals were hauntingly ordinary. A small-town evening, golden light fatting over quiet streets, a woman walking home with her bag of books swinging by her side. But now, with context, every step was loaded with terror, every familiar corner a reminder of the danger that had lurked unseen. Forensic experts testified once more, explaining how advancements in DNA analysis had finally unlocked the mystery. The coffee cup, once discarded and dismissed, had preserved microscopic traces of Caldwell's cells. Modern techniques amplified these traces, linking him to the crime with undeniable certainty. Each scientific detail was explained patiently, yet the impact was immediate. Jurors, observers, and even members of the Turner family felt the weight of confirmation that the man in custody had indeed committed the unspeakable act. Emily Turner, Rachel's mother, struggled to keep her composure as she recalled the years of uncertainty. Every holiday, birthday, and milestone had been overshadowed by Rachel's absence. Every tip and rumor that led nowhere had deepened the sense of despair. Yet, seeing the evidence laid bare, she felt a bittersweet release. The truth, however painful, was finally recognized. Mark Turner, her father, spoke quietly to reporters, "No one should endure what we have." But knowing who did this, and that justice is finally being served, gives us a small measure of peace. The prosecution's narrative was meticulous, laying out Caldwell's obsession, premeditation, and the lengths he went to avoid detection. They presented emails he had sent to himself, notes detailing Rachel's schedule, and witness testimonies of his suspicious behavior in the months leading up to her disappearance. Each revelation was a shock, demonstrating how a seemingly ordinary man could mask such calculated malice. Neighbors and friends who had interacted with him for years were left reeling, struggling to reconcile their memories of him with the criminal reality presented. The defense attempted to sow doubt, suggesting the DNA evidence could be contaminated or misinterpreted. They highlighted Caldwell's lack of prior violent convictions, his calm demeanor, and the passage of time as reasons for skepticism. But the prosecution countered decisively. Chain of custody records, contamination controls, and corroborating evidence left the jury with little room to doubt. Expert witnesses detailed the rigorous methods used in the DNA analysis, explaining how even the smallest biological trace can definitively link a suspect to a crime. Caldwell's demeanor shifted when called to testify. At first measured and calm, he gradually revealed cracks under questioning. He admitted to following Rachel, planning her abduction, and ultimately taking her life. His voice, cold and detached, described the moments that had haunted the town for over a decade. The courtroom shivered at his confession, the weight of his actions filling the air. It was the closure the community had waited for, but it came with a sting, the confirmation of a reality too cruel to accept fully. Outside the courthouse, the town of Northfield was a mixture of relief and disbelief. People who had passed Caldwell on the street for years, who had interacted with him in casual, everyday settings, struggled to comprehend how someone so ordinary could commit such evil. Conversations buzzed with shock, sorrow, and the collective processing of trauma. Parents spoke with their children about safety, neighbors formed watch groups, and community leaders emphasized vigilance without panic. Rachel's story became a cautionary tale, a reminder that danger can hide in plain sight. Inside, the emotional resonance of the case peaked when friends and family were allowed to speak. Rachel's childhood friend, Megan Sullivan, recounted the last time she saw her. "We laughed over coffee, shared dreams about college, and planned summer trips. I never imagined that night would be our last moment together. Knowing who did this is painful, but at least the story is finally complete." Every word brought tears, yet each testimony strengthened the collective resolve to honor Rachel's memory. The jury deliberated for hours, weighing evidence, testimonies, and expert analyses. When they returned, the room was electric with tension. The foreperson read the verdict aloud, guilty on all counts. The weight of years of unanswered questions lifted slightly as the sentence of life imprisonment without parole was confirmed. Justice, delayed but definitive, had been served. The aftermath saw the Turner family and community slowly beginning the healing process. Memorials were erected in Rachel's honor, scholarships established in her name, and safety initiatives launched to prevent similar tragedies. Detective Simmons continued her work, inspired by the success of the DNA breakthrough, revisiting other cold cases and reminding law enforcement nationwide that persistence and innovation can bring closure even decades later. For Rachel's family, closure was both painful and comforting. They visited the memorial garden, lit candles on anniversaries, and shared stories that kept her memory alive. The grief remained, but it was tempered by the knowledge that the man responsible had been held accountable. The town of Northfield also found a sense of renewed unity, a determination to protect its residents and ensure that Rachel Turner's story would never fade into silence. In the end, Rachel's life, though tragically cut short, became a symbol of resilience and justice. Her story reminded everyone who listened that even in the darkest circumstances, truth can prevail, evil can be exposed, and justice can be delivered. The town would remember her not just for the tragedy that befell her, but for the courage, persistence, and innovation that finally ensured she was never forgotten.